I'm going
Do your best.
What I'd like to do is point out an inconsistency and then allow my brother Sam to explain the inconsistency for us. Nabil pointed out that there are peaceful passages in the Quran. There are verses that seem to indicate that Muslims should live in peace with their neighbors. Exactly. And yet we also read other verses. For instance, if you have your Quran, you can read Surah 9, Ayah 29, which says, "Fight those who believe not in Allah nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden which hath been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger, nor acknowledge the religion of truth from among the people of the book," that's Jews and Christians, "until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued." Notice what this says. This does not say fight those who oppress you or fight to protect yourselves. It says fight those who believe not in Allah. Muslims are called to fight people who do not believe in Islam. And when we go to the greatest Muslim commentator of all time, Ibn Kathir, he comments on this verse. He tells us that the reason for fighting is given in the very next ayah, the very next verse, where we are told that Jews say that Uzair is the son of God, and that Christians say that Jesus is the son of God, and that this is the reason Muslims are called to fight us, because we blaspheme God. Yes, exactly. So notice, this is calling Muslims to fight people because of their beliefs. We find the same thing in the greatest collections of a hadith. I will read you a reference from Sahih al-Bukhari. In Sahih al-Bukhari, number 6924, we read, Allah's Messenger said, "I have been ordered to fight the people till they say, none has the right to be worshipped but Allah. And whoever says this, Allah will save his property and his life from me." We find the same thing in Sahih Muslim, number 30. Muhammad said, "I have been commanded to fight against people so long as they do not declare that there is no God but Allah. And he who professed it was guaranteed the protection of his property and life on my behalf, except for the right." Now, Muhammad here says that you should convert to Islam, and until you do, you are not safe from him. Exactly. This was a religious-based attack. And so we have a conflict here. I would like my brother Sam to solve this inconsistency for us.
Well, my brothers are doing a great job in discussing that you have a problem in the Quran. There are certain passages that seem to suggest that you should live at peace with people, you shouldn't force your religion on them. But then you have other passages that clearly say, subjugate the disbelievers, fight them until you bring them low and humiliate them and they pay the jizya as an indication that they've been humiliated. How do we reconcile these passages? Well, if you examine the life of Muhammad, and I invite the Muslims to do this again, lest we be accused of perverting their sources, distorting what the Islamic references say, you'll notice that when Muhammad was in Mecca and he was outnumbered by the disbelievers, he preached a message of tolerance. In fact, most of these passages that speak of peace were actually composed at this stage in his life where he was outnumbered and didn't have enough manpower, didn't have enough weaponry or money to mount a defensive. However, he went from that stage to what I call stage 2. Stage 2 is when Muhammad migrated from Mecca to Medina and became head of state and had enough people where he could now defend himself, and I put that in quotation marks because it wasn't the disbelievers who antagonized Muhammad, it was Muhammad who actually antagonized them, mocked them, ridiculed their gods, and they virtually begged him, you want to worship Allah? Continue to worship Allah, but for God's sake, stop attacking our gods. But he wouldn't do it. When he gets to Medina, he says, now you can defend yourself against the oppressors. This is what I call stage 2. Now he's no longer living in an area where he's outnumbered by the disbelievers. He's now in a location where he's safe. He can now gather people and weapons and money to mount an attack against those that he tried to subjugate but couldn't because he was outnumbered. Now he calls that self-defense or defending the Muslims against the oppressors. That's stage 2. Now when Muhammad has conquered Mecca and he's brought all the Arabian tribes under his headship, he implements stage 3. And what is stage 3? It's no longer just fight those who fight you. Now I want you to spread Islam and subjugate the world and bring them under the dominion of Allah and His Messenger. That's stage 3. That's offensive jihad. And when you get to the stage, you invite the local areas to become Muslim. And if they happen to be Jews and Christians, and they don't want to become Muslims, you invite them to pay jizya. If they refuse that, then you fight them, and to the victor goes the spoils. Let me give you an example from the Quran, how two passages, if you don't understand historical context, if you don't know the context of these passages are clearly contradictory. But if you understand historical context, you'll see it makes perfect sense. When Muhammad is in stage 2, he cannot subjugate and defeat his enemies. All he can do is defend himself, but without decisively defeating them. This is what he says to do in chapter 8, verse 61 of the Quran. Chapter 8, verse 61. And you can turn to your Quran and read this to see I'm not making this up. But if the enemy inclines toward peace, do thou also incline towards peace. If they want peace, seek peace. And trust in Allah, for He is the one that heareth and knoweth all things. However, we read chapter 47, verse 35 of the Quran. Notice what this passage says. The passage I just read said that if they incline peace, seek for peace. But now notice this. Be not weary and faint-hearted, crying for peace. Don't cry for peace. Don't seek for peace when you should be uppermost. See, when you are uppermost and you are dominant, do not seek peace and reconciliation with the disbelievers. Subjugate them. However, if you're not strong enough to subjugate them, and if they want peace, seek peace. This is because of the different stages in Muhammad's life, which explains why we have these contradictions.
Thank you, Brother Sam. Well, we're drawing close to the end of our program. Before we do, and when we do, I'm going to ask each of you for a final word. But before that, David, did you have anything else to add on this particular topic?
Well, I'd just like to agree with my brother Sam. In fact, the verse that he just quoted of the Quran, which tells Muslims not to seek peace, Islam's greatest commentator on this verse says what it means. He says, this verse means that Muslims shouldn't compromise, seek peace, or end the fighting with non-Muslims when Muslims are in a position of power. Exactly. We saw earlier that when Muslim women get out of line, the solution is to beat them into submission. The solution is violence. We saw when we have unbelievers, when people are rejecting Islam and Muslims are strong enough to fight them, the solution for this unbelief is violence. We find the same thing in other areas. When people leave Islam, when someone leaves Islam because they recognize that it is false, the solution is to kill the apostates. We have multiple references in all of the collections of Sahih Sitta. Muslims are told to kill the apostates. The solution is violence. When people criticize Islam or criticize Muhammad, according to Muslim sources, the solution is to fight them and kill them. Over and over again, we find that in every situation, the solution, when anything goes wrong, is violence. This is according to Islam.
Thank you very much. All right, David. Well, I really hope that we have some more callers. We are coming close to the end of the program tonight, but there's some very serious things being said here. And if I'm a Muslim listening to this program, I don't see how I could contain myself without either defending Islam or going ahead and calling in and asking how I could become a Christian.
Praise the Lord.
Well, I've been notified that we do have a little bit more time. We feel that there's some people that are out there that the Lord is yet to reach. And so we're going to extend the program a little bit longer for those of you who've been vacillating back and forth whether or not to call. We want to take your call and answer your questions. Now, we were talking about the myth, Islam is a religion of peace. Now, we have one more. Do we want to say anything more on this particular one? Anyone else have anything that you just got to add?
Yeah, I would like to say a little bit more.
Yes, please.
The verses in the Quran which say, just to clarify to those who haven't been able to keep up with the long slew of information, the verses which call for peace were the earliest verses in Islam.
Yes.
The verses which then started calling for more and more violence, as my brother Sam was saying, were different stages.
Yes.
And the last stage with which we were left was the one where Muhammad says, fight the unbelievers wherever you find them.